how do you put yourself in the position to say, I'm capable of telling this story, I'm willing to tell this story, and I'm going to go to this place to do it right and to do it in a way that translates onto the screen for the community, both the veteran community to see and feel, and the non-veteran community to see and feel?
It's such a great question. I think first and foremost, I had no agenda. I had no political agenda. All I wanted to do was to shine a light. All I wanted to do was to uncover the truth, which going into it, I didn't know what that was, And I think that a big part of it is I made a commitment that no one person would be above the mission, right? Not even myself, no one. And I stayed true to that. And as you can imagine, all the rooms that I was laughed out of, that Matt and I were laughed out of in Hollywood, and we never bended the knee, we never compromised.
Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right?
My name is Kerry Kite. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post 9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists, and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills.
Episode 167 features my friend and repeat guest, Steven Grayhm. He's an actor, a writer, a producer, a director, and all-around filmmaker. This year, he's releasing Sheepdog, a narrative film about post-traumatic growth.
Welcome. This is Veteran Made.
Our merch store is live at store.veteranmadeproductions.com. Grab hats, t-shirts, and hoodies in both performance and tri-blend cotton fabrics. Use code VM-5OFF for 5% off your purchase. Veteran Made is also sponsored by GoPills, a military-grade nootropic that contributes to brain health over time. Use code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. I get my collagen protein from Bubs Naturals, where you can use code VETERANMADE, all one word, at checkout for 20% off your order. We're also proud to partner with True Made Foods, which makes condiments free from added sugar and sweetened with real foods. Use code VET at checkout for 15% off. We love socks in this house. I get my wife new socks every Christmas. More importantly, we love American-grown and made socks. Use code VETERANMADE15 at rucksocks.com for 15% off. And lastly, I end my day with Rack Out from Bravo Actual to maintain quality sleep, resulting in a well-rested body and mind. Use code VETERANMADE with a space between the words at checkout for 15% off your order. Enjoy the episode. Good morning from the great state of Ohio for me, and good morning from the great state of Massachusetts. Am I right?
That is correct. Western Massachusetts, yep.
Steven Grayhm, welcome back to Veteran Made.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, brother. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. So this is fun. I just went back and looked. You were guest number 3 on this podcast.
Yeah, those were the early days, man. We were frontiersmen, weren't we?
Yeah, it was wild. I had you and Nate and Don on, and yeah, I don't know. It's funny. It feels like just yesterday in many ways, but going on the podcasting journey, much like the filmmaking journey, which we'll obviously talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of once you're in it and you've done stuff, you're like, oh yeah, no, I did that pretty recently. I'm like, no, actually I did that back in 2021, and now it's the end of 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could imagine how 14 years on this journey of Sheepdog feels like. There are moments I look back, I'm like, was that? And you're like, that was 2011.
Yeah.
That's where it all began. Yeah, it's crazy. And congratulations on all your success and how much you guys have been able to grow the podcast and your commitment to it. So that was an honor to be on in those early days. And Don McAllister, yeah, what a champion, what a warrior. I'm just so lucky that I get to call him brother,
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we were going from episode 3 to episode 166 here with you. So yeah,
Jeez,
we're here talking
all right.
Yeah, wild. So we're here talking about Sheepdog, which this episode will go live next week in the lead up before the film is released in December. So we'll definitely get into all the plugging and when and where it's going to be playing and all of that good stuff. But you've already mentioned this is a 14-year journey. I mean, dude, let's dive right in and take us to the beginning of this story, the heart of the story, what made you want to tell it, and what you've been working on for the last decade and a half.
Yeah, so something I actually haven't talked about. I'll give you the genesis of actually like when pen first went to paper, but just like my interest, my fascination, my empathy, so I moved to Los Angeles in 2003. It was 2 months before Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I remember sitting on the PCH on the freeway, like hearing the radio, announcement of the operation. And it was in the age, I just got a new apartment, and it was in the age of internet updates, right? Like that was like a new thing, like Yahoo updates. And I remember like as the first US casualties were coming in, and there was this like very sobering feeling. And I remember that week, like as an actor, I think I had like auditions that week, and I didn't go to any of them. I was like so fixated on that we were living in this time, and I think that was part of what my interest in empathy for those that were making the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of their country. So in 2011, fast forward, my car breaks down just a few hours north of the city, and I got picked up by a local tow truck driver. And during that drive, he began to open up about the challenges he was having in his marriage, being a father of three, financial hardship, and then he went into explaining to me all the medications that he was on, and then he went into his military service. And you know, I didn't say much during that time. I just listened to him, and throughout that entire conversation, for that 3 hour drive, he kept saying that, God, I've never told anybody this. I haven't even told my wife this. I haven't even told a therapist this. And so when I got back to LA, he dropped me off and whatever. And I looked into his eyes, and I'll never forget like being like, hey, thank you so much. If you ever need anything, you ever want to go for a beer or whatever. And there was this look in his eyes like, I'm never going to see you again. And I probably want it that way. And that really stuck with me. And that was sort of the spark, because what I learned from that experience, Carrie, was the power of listening without prejudice, right? That's all in that moment that man needed. But also, I think probably a hard thing is like, is being able to share your story and share what you're going through without judgment. And I think that was probably very cathartic with him. So, that month I couldn't get him out of my mind. And I was certain, I said that there has to be more men and women like him that are going through this. And what is anyone doing about it? And what can we do about it? Right. So, that month I was doing a film with Matt Dallas, who plays my co-star in the film. And I told him about this experience. And I said to Matt, I think I'm going to go on the road this summer and just like, I'll take a break from acting and I'll just go and meet people, just go anyone who will talk to me, and I'll just journal, right? And just try to understand, not knowing for sure it was going to be a screenplay, or I was just trying to like maybe just uncover the truth. And I said to him, if it becomes a screenplay, you should play my best friend in it. Because there was a quality in Matt that I saw, which was Matt would share stories while we were filming on the Paramount Ranch at the time. And he shared a very deeply personal story to me. And I remember him smiling through the pain. And that's what that tow truck driver had done. And it was very, like just his humanity. So went on the road trip that summer, and it changed everything. And it became very personal. And I would be remiss to not admit that we definitely bit off more than we could chew. We had no idea what we were doing. We were just like idealistic, we're going to save the world kind of mentality. You go out there with a camera and you set it up and you put on your first veteran and they're talking to you. And it wasn't until that camera was shut off during lunch that first veteran that we met with began to really open up. And then we got it. And we're like, okay. And we sat back in the car. We were in McAllen, Texas, the southern part of Texas, and we had to make a decision, like, do we move forward, or do we go back? Because it was very sobering to be like, hey, we're in this deep, and what do we do with this responsibility? And of course, we soldiered on, and And that became the beginning of Sheepdog.
Yeah, I want to get into some of that. There's a handful of threads to pull on here, and some I think really interesting intersections. I want to ground it for the audience. I saw a screener of the film, and it's incredible. I love it as a filmmaker myself, right? As a screenwriter, as a director, as a producer, as somebody who's done like a little bit of work in front of the camera. Like from a craft perspective, I want people to understand that like it's a really great movie. It's a really well made movie. I watched it by myself. I'm going to show it. I'm going to watch it again with my wife and business partner, who I produce with and who directs most of our stuff. Because what you did really well, and I just want the audience to hear this before we dive in and keep talking about some other things. What you did really well was tell human stories with a backdrop of this military service, of trauma, and not just for the veterans that are featured in the film, but for everybody. Right? Like I found myself really connecting with all of the main characters in ways that I just certainly was not expecting. I think there's a lot of storytelling that happens in this space that feels incomplete, I think, to a lot of viewers as they watch it. And I think it's because of what you just said, which is when you went on this journey to chronicle some stories, to get some ideas and to learn and understand, when the camera came off and you were quote unquote off the record, that's when you started to feel and experience the real thoughts, feelings, considerations, and experiences of the people that you were initially trying to connect to on the record, so to speak, which is what makes documentary filmmaking very hard, right? Because it often feels on the nose because somebody feels like in some way, shape, or form they have to perform, even if they're trying to be real, just themselves in a sit-down interview. However, when it's just two people sharing lunch, all of a sudden, you as a creative, as a writer, as an actor, you're finding things that you can connect to. So just a statement, I just want to ground the audience before folks think that this is kind of just another one of those stories in the space. It absolutely isn't. But you also, I would imagine, are wrestling with, as a creative, as an actor, as a writer, you're probably thinking to yourself, man, there's a lot to work with here, but I also want to kind of respect this experience. How did you initially wrestle with those probably conflicting feelings of, I want to respect this story that I'm telling and these people that I'm trying to inhabit, but as a craftsman, I'm going to really enjoy inhabiting those people and telling that story? Oh, I lost you. I don't know. Oh, you're muted. Hold on. Let me unmute you.
Sorry. There we go. I would say from a screenwriting standpoint, it was always really important to me. I mean, the biggest challenge, just to be fair, for me was always getting this right. Was always making sure that it felt authentic. And that's why sitting in front of the men and women that we sat in front of for years, role playing at the VA in Detroit, I had access to, therapists, to neuropsychologists, neurosurgeons, like TBI specialists. Like we were really entrenched, and I was able to, immerse myself so fully. It's interesting how, and I really appreciate you saying that, because the characters are so multi-dimensional. Part of that comes with really great casting, but also, it is very much a human story. It's not a post-traumatic stress movie. It's a post-traumatic growth movie, right? So that journey to get there, right? We go there in the beginning of the film to show you, what it is like to walk that path, but also the worthy path and the righteous path to get on the other side of your trauma by doing the work. And I think that, there was a version of the script that had 3 deployments in it. And with budgetary reasons, those got cut a year before going to camera. But you know what that did, though? That informed every character, Matt's character, my character, of what we went through. So that's all behind the eyes. When you're sitting in when I give that sort of monologue, if you will, to Virginia Madsen's character, I could see the sheep pen, not just because I sat with all the guys that served in that unit that military operation was loosely inspired by, but also because I was going to show that. That was a deployment that we were going to show on screen. So in my mind's eye, as I'm telling her that story on camera, I could see vividly the crack in the wall and, the thatch on the sheep pen roof and everything. And I feel like that was a big part of doing that research. So, and then I think the other thing too, Carrie, is that when you don't have money to throw at every problem as a filmmaker, you're forced to just totally rely on instinct, right? So as the writer, director, and then the actor, there was never a time I was off in the corner with a script going, what would Calvin do here? You know,
Yeah.
the world is burning down around you, as they say in independent filmmaking.
Yeah.
And so as the walls are closing in on you, you know, you go through the technical aspect of it, setting up the shot, what the camera movements are already going to be, where you want people to be, what lenses you're going to use, that sort of thing. And then literally my process was, my final conversation would be with my cinematographer. There'd be a brief pause, and then I would just say the words on the page and just trust that the work had been done on that page. And lastly, I would say, all the stories that were shared with us over the years, like those, and the trust and the responsibility we had, that's in you. That never leaves you. You don't have to go too far or travel too far within your mind's eye to see those stories that were shared, And so I felt like by the time we got to set, that was always on the surface. It wasn't something that I had to think about to access. It was there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also that combined with the reality of the relationships you have in real life, right? Like I lived in LA when I first got out of film school before moving to New York and moved, kind of where we are now. But, I had writing partners who were actors, right? And like I would go to class with them, and I would observe them working that craft, and then we would write together, and then we would produce together. And it made the work better because we were friends and because we knew each other so intimately on that front, that then the characters that we created, for me on the page and behind the camera, and for them on the page and in front of the camera, like there was more dimensionality there than just the story that we were telling. It was also the story that we were living, right? As friends and as writing partners, as creative partners and things like that. So when I heard you talking about, I had a flashback in a good way to when you said, oh, I was on set with Matt, and I was saying, hey, whenever this next project comes up, I want you to play this person. I would imagine that gives you some serious momentum going into something like this, where you have somebody that you can not just lean on, but somebody that you can like really integrate with and partner with to tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, Matt's told the story before. It reminds me of so like 2 weeks out before going to camera, it was like, Matt had come out to Western Massachusetts, and we were in pre-production, and he short of having a panic attack came to me and was like, listen, man, like, do you have video footage from years ago that we took with veterans? And did it like, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I just, I got to make sure I get this right. And I was like, Matt, you sat in front of those men and women with me. That story is now woven into the fabric of who you are now. You will carry that with you for the rest of your life. Just trust the words on the page and just remain open. You are just the vessel to tell the story, and take that pressure off. You've done the work, Now we just have to go out there and remain open to it, and I think that was like a big part of it, because, what would happen is, so we would do a road trip, and then, I'd feel like, oh, I need more here, or I need more of the story there, or I had things I'd written down, curiosity. So for instance, like at one point after the first road trip, I went to Pittsburgh, and I just got a one-way ticket to meet with a veteran, Brad Link, who's now, one of my best friends. And I had the honor to sign his marriage license when he got married to his wonderful wife, Jen. And so, but going back to 2011, when we didn't know each other, he was one of the guys in that military operation from 2008, June 4th, that we talk about in the film. And everybody in his unit that I spoke to was like, he's never going to talk to you. He's never going to talk to you. And he was very resistant. We had a few phone calls, and I said, why don't I come out to visit you? Next week, I'm on a one-way flight to Pittsburgh. Didn't know how it was going to go. I figured if it lasted a day, I would get on a plane and go home, or I would stay. I ended up staying with him for a month. And part of what informed, like, just to give you an example, the writing and the characters wasn't just about talking about someone's military service, was seeing all the other components of their life, right? Seeing how the family, like, there was a moment at, like, that he was going through, he was using couch cushions as village homes, right? And kind of reenacting it, right? And he was changing color, and his mom was in the kitchen. She was visiting us, and she was cooking. And I remember she came out with a casserole, like, as a late night snack, and she's watching her son retell a story she's never heard. And he's like, no, you got to get in here, Mom. You got to hear this. And it was seeing those sorts of things as well that informed it, seeing his sister react to that. And then, I haven't shared this story, and this is important just to show you how surreal this was for me. After 3 weeks, right? I was like, why don't we go for a beer? You know, like, we can, because I always had a policy that when I was working, I never drank. Well, like with veterans, like, I'm not your drinking buddy. I'm respecting your story, and I want to get it right, you know? And so after about 3 weeks of working, we go to a local watering hole in, like, on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. And I go to the bathroom, and I come back, and there's a group of people that were standing there with Brad, and he's kind of smiling, looking at me, and they're like, hey, they recognize you from White Chicks, and they want a photo. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. And so, like, you know, I give them a couple, you know, lines from the movie, whatever, everybody's laughing and all good. And I remember distinctly looking at Brad, and there was, like, this sense of pride that I was his buddy that was in a movie. And I was looking at him going, if these people ever knew the courage this man has that most don't, you know, leaping over 6-foot cinder block walls in the middle of a night in a foreign country during a village sweep. I'm chopped liver. And I was like, it was this feeling of, like, wow, the ordinary person in the extraordinary circumstance. And that's never left me. So when we talk about, like, when we use the word hero, and that's thrown around a lot, that's the hero I see. That's the courage I see. And it's nothing small, right? And then to think that, you know, I think at the time he was working at a restaurant, like at a Bahama Breeze, and he was like, I was commanding my squad into combat, and now my responsibility is to refill your iced tea. And just, like, you know, and we were able to laugh about it, but it also, that's part of the struggle, right? Especially when you first transition out, is your sense of purpose and your value and your worth, you know? And I think I saw a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, that's a great story. I was talking to somebody the other day about my transition out of the military, and I started working in restaurants, and I was not involved in direct combat, and I was not certainly not involved in anything as harrowing as what you're describing and what's described in the film. But I did go work in a PF Chang's right out of the military, and I was joking with the person. I was like, you know, PF Chang's actually has a pretty rigorous, and they did at the time, like, a very rigorous training program. Like, it's great as far as chain restaurants go. Like, it's a really great one. The food is good. And they do a great job. Like, they run a tight ship, and it's really fun. And so it was a tough week, right? To, like, learn how to wait tables at that level. I'd only worked at a Steak and Shake before in high school, you know, before I enlisted. So I got out, and I was, like, doing this thing, and I went through the week, like, pretty well, and was on the floor for the first time. There was another guy that had served in the military. He had served in direct combat, actually, during the invasion in Iraq. This was in 2009 that I got out. So, like, kind of right around this time frame that you're talking about. And I remember getting on the floor for the first time with all the other servers and just watching people freak out about little things, like, oh, this lady needs her Diet Coke, and this appetizer didn't get out there. And I'm looking around, I'm like, we're not getting shot at. I'm not loading bombs under mortar fire anymore. Like, I'm just kind of doing this. And I looked at the other veteran. I was like, hey, man, is it always like this? Like, do people are just, like, freaking out over, like, Diet Cokes and appetizers and soup and stuff? And he goes, yeah, it's pretty funny, isn't it? And I go, yeah, it is. And then we just kind of went, kind of like, you know,
about our business and did our thing. But I'm also struck by like what you're describing. That's the power of storytelling. And I think um, when an actor and a writer like yourself can push through, because a lot of people talk about this, right? There's a lot of films made in this genre. There's a lot of films made about war. There's a lot of films made about veterans, and actors sort of always talk about it, right? Like, oh, these people are the real heroes, and we're just putting their story on screen so that other people can learn and understand what they did and what others like them do to appreciate the freedoms that we have, and sort of that kind of talk, right, that gets thrown around in Hollywood. But with you, I mean, there is a certain amount of, and I'll use the word, there's a certain amount of courage to say like, all right, let me humble myself here and say, what do I bring here that this guy can't? Like, this guy can't actually tell his story so that these people that are in the bar understand. But I can tell his story, and I can tell other people's stories in a way. So I'd love to hear about I don't know how you frame it. I don't know if you frame it as humility. I don't know, just use the words yourself to describe it. But how do you put yourself in the position to say, I'm capable of telling this story, I'm willing to tell this story, and I'm going to go to this place to do it right, and to do it in a way that translates onto the screen for the community, both the veteran community to see and feel, and the non-veteran community to see and feel?
It's such a great question. I think first and foremost, I had no agenda. I had no political agenda. All I wanted to do was to shine a light. All I wanted to do was to uncover the truth, which going into it, I didn't know what that was, and I think that a big part of it is I made a commitment that no one person would be above the mission, right? Not even myself, no one. And I stayed true to that. And as you can imagine, all the rooms that I was laughed out of, that Matt and I were laughed out of in Hollywood, and I could just tell you stories that blow your hair back, and we never bended the knee. We never compromised. We were able to, I went out and raised the financing for the movie in private equity out of Texas. I didn't have to bend the knee to the Hollywood machine. And therefore, I wasn't getting silly notes from a studio going, oh, I think it would be cooler if the character said that. Or, oh, I think, I went through a really rigorous process of notes and script notes over years and years and refined the story. And, I did tons of that. I mean, I probably wrote over 1,000 drafts over the years easily. But I think that when you don't make it about yourself and you're in service of somebody else, and I think that as a civilian, my perspective is I often heard from veterans that they were like, when they were in the shit, it was not about a political party. It was not about anything other than the guy to your left and the guy to your right. That's what it's about, right? And I think that as a civilian, that sort of MO was what I was able to carry into it and adhere to it and stay true to it. So there's never something that ever felt like, I'll give you an example, even shooting it, there was no vanity. I didn't care as an actor, what I looked like. I don't even think I wore makeup in the movie, and that wasn't to be like, oh, I'm so rough. And, it was just sort of like these all have to be real people. They all have to be real people. And you see that in the movies. There's, one of the greatest compliments we got in the early days when we were first screening it to critics was, this feels almost like a documentary. And I really took that to heart, because I didn't want any melodrama. I didn't want any, there was never a time of story structure is important because you have 2 hours to tell the story and you want it to be compelling. You don't want it to be an industrial film where the audience either feels like they have a finger pointed at them, like you're not doing enough for veterans and that sort of thing. You want to take the audience on a compelling 2-hour journey. And at the end of that, you hope that they're entertained. You hope that they laugh, they cry, but you also hope that they're left with a sense of hope and a call to action. And I think that being sort of our guiding light and our North Star, there was never any way for anything else to sort of get in the way,
Yeah.
But again, I do would just button that with, that was the freedom that I had with truly making an independent film.
It reminded me of Manchester by the Sea. That
I
was
appreciate that. Yeah, that tonally, I told my cinematographer that that's what I wanted. I said it was somewhere. It was, we used to always reference it that it was like the Deer Hunter meets Good Will Hunting meets Manchester by the Sea,
yeah.
where it's as dark as Manchester by the Sea, but has moments like Good Will Hunting,
Hmm.
but also has the depth of the Deer Hunter, especially what we see those men go through in Deer Hunter.
Yeah, hell of a cross section of references to set yourself up
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
That's
And then of course the end of the film is which we won't, spoiler alert, we won't give away, was an homage to Castaway with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really really well done from a craft perspective. I mean, the who was the cinematographer? Who is the cinematographer?
Evans Brown. So Evans did the first season of The Terminal List. And
Incredible
what
work.
really struck me about so this is what I told him when I first met with him. I said, I want the film to feel like it's either from the 70s or the 90s, because they were similar, like very
Yep.
filmic, film
Yep.
grain, minimal light. I said, I don't want any fancy diva lights, Kino lights that are going to make someone look lit. Um, and all these were all practical locations, no soundstage. Everywhere we shot was a real location, and that's why it feels very lived in, very real. Down to my character's apartment, down to the VA in it, down to the paper mill. We actually shot in a paper mill.
Yeah, I love that. That sequence was
Yeah,
just that sequence
yeah,
was. I mean, it's a great way to open the film because you set the tone beautifully with it. Because you're immediately in it and connected to not just the character, but to the environment and to the world he lives in now, which I think was a really smart way to open the film by connecting to where he is now and what's going on. So that when you do connect to his past and what he is wrestling with, you're actually grounded in who he is right now instead of starting with the like, hey, look at this, all this stuff that this guy's dealt with. No, just let's experience who this guy is, a sort of slice of his life, and then we'll start to unpack some of those other things a little bit by bit. Like it was very tactical the way you did it, but still artistic and yeah, beautiful.
yeah. I appreciate you saying that, because it was really important for me to show that this guy's not broken.
Yeah,
This guy doesn't feel sorry for himself,
yeah,
right? He's
yeah,
he's getting up every morning. He's going to work. He's doing everything he can do,
yeah,
right? And and I think that was important to show, because that was, I mean, if I sat in front of, as you know, just so many people, and that's all I was trying to do, Carrie, was hold the mirror up, right? And tell the honest story. And that's what I saw. I mean, I sat in front of people that were so deeply traumatized from service or from childhood or both, or whatever it was, and they got up every day and put their boots on, laced up, and went out there and got on with it, and that was more often than not. And I thought it was really important to not tell this Hollywood story, the typical broken veteran on all these drugs kind of nonsense. And I didn't think that was not only not interesting, but just not what I saw. Just not.
Well, yeah, I was actually having a conversation with somebody yesterday here in Columbus who's working with veterans at Ohio State, and she was running a couple of things by me because she's getting information given to her by experts, right? That haven't served or that kind of study this from a psychological, sociological standpoint. And she's telling them, hey, here's what my experience is with these veterans. And they're like, no, that's not true. What's true is this. And then so she ran a couple of things by me and check, check, check. Yep, that's my experience, because that's what I thought. Like I'm talking to these human beings who are going through this program with me, and this is what they're telling me. And then these experts are telling me these other things, and it just doesn't square. There's a gap that needs to be bridged here, and I don't think it can actually necessarily be bridged by those experts. Now, I want to come back to that because you work with the VA and some of the things that happen here. Like we do need people, right? Like his character did need somebody who understood something from a technical and psychological standpoint to help him bridge that gap and equip him with some of the skills that he needed to do the work as you describe it. But so two things. One, the character building for him was, I thought, really well done in the sense that he was a whole person who wasn't totally broken in every aspect of his life, but there are elements of each aspect of his life that are broken. But his relationship with his daughters isn't perfect, but it's not terrible. His
I'd say
relationship.
fragmented. I'd say fragmented.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you did that with his relationship with each of these other characters, which again, it never fell into melodrama and it never fell into anything stereotypical. It was, hey, even though if you're not a veteran, you can relate to some aspects of these fragments.
Mm-hmm. Well, that to me was the whole story. I wanted to show a couple things. One, the impact on the family, what the family takes on, because that's really important, right? Like my brother-in-law, both my brother-in-laws are combat vets. One of my brother-in-laws, his last deployment to Afghanistan was in 2016. We were on bated breath for 9 months, right? Like it's that real. And I hadn't really experienced that because though I'm descendants of like my grandfather was a POW, he was a Polish farmer, right? I didn't have a military family where we had that experience together where like we hope Jason's going to be okay, you know? And I thought it was really important to show in the film just like the ripple effect, right? That it how it impacts the kids, how it impacts your spouse, family members, extended family, and because that to me was the whole story. And then it's just those relationships. You know, our story picks up 10 years basically after my character's last deployment, and I thought that was a unique, because that was the tow truck driver. That was many of the men and women that I first started sitting in front of. They were already out probably 3 to 5 years. And as it took time to make the film, write the screenplay, all that kind of stuff, as I got older, the character got older. And I thought that was sort of the sweet spot to like pick up with, to go, well, where are we at 10 years? We've seen the film where you've just transitioned out, but I thought it would be much more interesting to show where are we at 10 years later? Because there's a lot of life lived in those 10 years. Again, I know men and women that have been through multiple divorces in that time. I know, or have lost brothers and sisters they served with. And I
Or
thought
just
that would be
that happens, right? Like the rest of life happens as well, not necessarily
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about the positives. You start a business, you start a VSO, there's a lot, and then the challenges of that, and that's why I thought, because I saw the full gamut of it, and I wanted to, it was important to tell a story that was complete, but that didn't have an ending that felt inauthentic, but also felt hopeful, right? And I've said it before, but that message is doing the work, and that doesn't. Not everybody, as you've said, not everybody's been in combat, not everybody's been deployed, but those that have put on the uniform have certainly made a commitment to service and sacrifice, as has their families.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I obviously tend to talk about it from a professional transition standpoint and tend to talk about it from an artistic standpoint, right, on this podcast. But I often say it's an ongoing transition, right? This idea that you go through TAP, and then you use the GI Bill, and then you either start your business or get a job, and then you're done transitioning. Is just flat out not true. Like this is something, if you serve for 4 years, 25 years, it is a big, like you're talking about with you and Matt, like those experiences are embedded within you. And it's tough, right? Because you don't want to over identify with the veteran side of your identity or the service member side of your identity, but you can't completely let it go either. You have to figure out how to integrate it into your life moving forward. And a lot of that is the work, right? That you're describing, as you say, do the work. And for some folks, that's mental health. For some folks, that's professional health. For some folks, that's relational health. But in reality, it's all of it for all of us.
Yeah, and I think that when I say about doing the work, like, listen, I'm a civilian. I'm not saying it like we say it in the film. The hardest journey can be walking through that front door, and I think like in the movie we do talk about it, that it's okay to not be okay. And you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do the work alone. And I think that this is a good segue that if you want to talk about the VA and my experience there, because look, I'll tell you, my brother-in-law, I mean, he's told me he's waited out in the parking lot with his kids for 3 hours waiting for his appointment. I got to see it all, and I was really nervous in the beginning. Like, are they going to hide the horror stories that I've heard from me because I'm the guy from Hollywood, and they're like, going to give me sort of limited access, and I'm telling you, I got full access, and I saw it all, and one of the things that really touched me was that I quickly began to see that these were the unsung heroes, that there was people coming to work, putting in long hours passionately, not getting rich doing it, and changing lives, and really caring about what they were doing. And I'll never forget standing in the cafeteria at the VA Medical Center in Detroit back in like 2012, and a corpsman that I'd been working with, pointing across the cafeteria to a trauma therapist, saying, "That lady right there saved my life." And I spent time with the lady he was talking about, because her name's Dr. Tara Consolino. And I remember, not just in the work I was doing at the VA with her, where I would sit in on, orientation, like PTSD orientation classes, and then some of the therapies that they were doing, like EMDR and so on. But then we would go out after work and chat over dinner. And I would always like marvel like how she had to compartmentalize the heavy day to then being a single mother, and for all intents and purposes living a very modest lifestyle, and just thinking like, wow, you're not all heroes, wear capes. Like this is just, unbelievable. And I wanted people to see that, and I wanted to, because that was my experience more often than not. I did work at the Detroit VA shelter. And shout out to Tyrone Chapman, who's a gentleman that ran that in Cass Corridor when it was still there. And these are people that are deeply connected to the work they're doing, that they wake up every morning to make a difference, and there's no glory in it. There's no, they do that to touch lives. They do that to save lives. And that was really important to show that as well. And so I think that, like, my feeling about my experience again is that, it's not a perfect system, but it's the only one we have. I think that as long as we can continue to make sure that veteran benefits extend into the private practice world, I think that's really important, because I think it's important to have options. I don't think anybody should be driving 2 hours to try to get an appointment somewhere. And I think that that's, where we need to do better. And then we just need to do better with providing access and information so that veterans know that it's there and know the benefits of it, and doing a better job of providing that sort of education and access, I think was really where we need to make the leaps and bounds.
For sure. And I'm not a policy expert by any stretch.
Yeah.
It always just comes back to relationships and humans, right? And
Yep.
the veteran population needs to be connected to other human beings that
Yes.
work in that organization, right? Right now, it's this idea of, veterans as a monolithic group are being told that they need to connect to this massive bureaucracy.
Yes.
And they hear noise from both sides of the political aisle in this country about what that bureaucracy is, what it does well, what it doesn't do well, what it should do, what it shouldn't do, how we should splinter it,
Yeah.
and give options through private options, which I also, agree with you. But again, it comes back to the connection to the humans that work there. And I thought what you did with Virginia Madsen's character in this film was incredible. You made her a real struggling human being who has her own shit that she's dealing with. And she was a fully fleshed out human character. And so was your character, right? And to see those two humans connect in the film, like, that is the way to tell the story, to bring it back to human relationships, because we're so splintered as a society and as a culture right now to think of the veteran population as a monolith, and to think about the federal government as a bureaucracy. We're just losing humanity. That divide is only going to be bridged between humans' minds and hearts.
I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate you saying that. And I think it's also worth saying that, and I experienced this over the years of certain opinions about conflicts that we go into as a country. And again, the film is not political, Those that serve do not get to choose the wars they go into. And that's worth saying. And the courage that it takes to put that uniform on, and have to trust, and I do touch on that in the film. Like, my character does talk about when he first enlisted and what was going through his mind at the time, and essentially he says, "I just wanted to protect my brothers," like, and I think that's really important, because here's the thing, Carrie, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's like there's so much noise out there, and I think that's the part of it that isn't helpful. I'm not standing here posturing, going like, this connective tissue between this branch and this branch, and what I see is this on a really simple level. I go and meet with veterans all across the country, oftentimes in rural areas. There's no connective tissue, not even to a fellow veteran. It doesn't even matter if they serve with them or not, right? And I know that the VFW and our American Legion, that was that system from different generations. And a lot of the younger generations are just not taking advantage of or interested really in going to their local American Legion and hanging out and that sort of thing. But that's what that system was sort of there for. Go play pool, have a beer, shoot the shit, that kind of thing. And so, like, part of our challenge is getting those veterans out and getting them connected to other veterans. And how do we do that? And I have so many different ideas and different things that even that we've been working on. I mean, that was part of our partnership right now with VetTix, right? And just to talk about that a moment. So VetTix has just over, I think, roughly 2.5 million certified members that are veterans, and you can sign up for it. And you enter lotteries basically for tickets in your area, right? So if you want to go see a concert, a sporting event, but the genesis of what they're trying to do is they're trying to create memories for veterans and their families that last a lifetime, right? And that's such a simple thing. Getting you out of your house to have this experience with other veterans, or just with your own family, with your buddies, your girlfriends. And I think that's something that we were really excited about, to be the first movie, Sheepdog being the first movie that VetTix had partnered with, because that's what we wanted to do with our film, was always to bring people together, and also have a movie that you could say to your family who are civilians, let's go see this together, and that's kind of like a very simple first step, but one that we felt very compelled to make sure that we were trying to accomplish.
Well, I think simple steps are often the best ones, right? I think part of the splintering that I think has happened in this country is, we try to make things overly complex, and in reality, simple steps are the better ones, right? Like this idea of connecting over an event that you want to enjoy, whether it's a concert or a sporting event. I went to a Ohio State football game last year with a friend who got tickets through VetTix, right? And I didn't even know that.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's like, "Hey, we're in town for the game. Like, do you guys want to go?" It was like him and his husband, and then me and my wife. And he was like, "Hey, we're coming into town for the game." He went to Ohio State, years ago. He's like, "Hey, we're coming into town. Do you want to go to the game?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I got 2 tickets for me and my wife. And then we're sitting there having some beers before the game. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got these through VetTix. Have you ever heard of them?" He's an Air Force guy too. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have heard of that, but I didn't really know what it was. I think I've seen the airport signage or whatever." And he explained it to me. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." And here we are having beers, going to watch a game together. You know what I mean? It's like, it just kind of ends up
amazing.
Being a fun thing. And I think, there's obviously a handful of VSOs that do great work. And I know there's a handful of other VSOs
Absolutely.
that you guys are partnering with on this film. And, there's a danger in having too many of those out there, right? Because a lot of times veterans get choice fatigue, the idea of like, who do I connect with and why and where and how and all of these different things. But I think simplifying these processes down to what's the best way to build a relationship with another human being, right? Seems to be.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
That we can move forward. And stories are an incredible way to do that. And yeah, love what you did with this story. I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to come back.
Yeah, I'm all good. Go for it.
The idea of, you said you didn't you didn't have an agenda and you didn't bend the knee to the Hollywood machine. Obviously everybody has an agenda now, right? And even people listening to this are going to hear, they're going to hear you say that, they're going to hear me repeat it, and they're going to bring their own bias to it, right? They're going to make an assumption.
That's fair.
Right? Yep. And that's okay. That's the world that we're in.
Yeah.
But how do you operate in the world now? What's the benefit of not having an agenda?
Because so here's the thing for anyone listening, and this will really help everybody out. The first half of my life, I lived in Canada. The second half in the U.S. I was not indoctrinated by any kind of political party. I didn't, and so when we talk about this seminal moment with this tow truck driver in 2011, it was his humanity, and it was my empathy. That was the spark. It's that simple. So when you set out on your own dime, ill-equipped, I'd even say, but unequipped, to go out there, and you're just, all you want is people to trust you and to earn that trust and to build that trust and folks to talk to you. And I can't say it enough. In the beginning, nobody wanted to speak to us, right? And I understood that. And it took building that trust. And how you build that trust is you listen, and you start to form the questions that your curiosity, and people can see that and they can identify your own lack of motives or your genuineness, I suppose. But I only can say this, Carrie, is that it's art, right? So everyone's going to get an opinion, and so they should, but I feel like the proof is always in the pudding, and it's on the screen. And I think that what we experienced over the last year on the film festival circuit, we screened all over the country, from Naples, Florida, to Southern California, to Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Iowa, Omaha. And the response was so humbling, but from veterans of all conflicts and generations, from their families, from mental health care professionals, Gold Star families. I can tell you so many different stories, but I'll share one. When we were in Annapolis, and there was a busload of Gold Star mothers that joined us from the Maryland chapter. And just think about how nervous I was. I was like, I hope this movie connects with them. And, and they showed up, and I got to speak to them really briefly before the screening, and then the movie screens. And in the lobby, we were all together, like in a huddle, and tears, laughter, love. And there was a light that I saw return in their eyes of feeling seen and heard. Because we hired 5 Gold Star family members in the film, but there's a scene in it that clearly it's their experience.
Yep.
And that meant everything to me, man. And I don't want to get emotional about it, but you can't get to that place, right? If you have an agenda in your mind of people always, I didn't know the story I wanted to tell until the story presented itself, right? I didn't ever map out, this is what it has to be, and this war scene will be really cool, and he's really gritty and he does this. I didn't base it. I knew I was never going to get the story just reading a book or watching documentaries or movies. I knew I had to sit in front of it and see it for my own self. And I think that's the best way I can say that to anybody listening. And then you get to make that decision for yourself when you see it, and hopefully you agree with us.
Well said. Nothing for me to add there. So this is going to be released in December. Yeah.
It'll be in limited theaters in December for awards eligibility, and then it'll go nationwide in January.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll get all that linked out so folks can find it in their area in December if possible, and then get out in January and see the film. Steven, where can folks find you? Where can folks find the film? Where can folks support?
Yeah, so if you visit sheepdogthemovie.com, you can sign up for updates. We keep that pretty well updated, and then join us on our Instagram, which is Sheepdog the Movie. On X is Sheepdog the Film, and we're very interactive. We love hearing from folks. We love hearing from folks that share their stories and their stories of service and so on, and that's been really great. And then if you are a veteran and you haven't signed, or a first responder, you can sign up at vettix.org or firsttix.org. We will be launching our Pay It Forward campaign in the next few weeks, which we're really excited about. There's a lot of great news about that. And we just actually shot on Monday, we shot our spot with Steve Weintraub, who's the CSO of Vettix. We shot that in LA, and we're really excited to share that with everybody. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. We can't wait to see everybody out in the theaters in January in the new year, and cannot be more grateful for the profound response that we've received. And we just hope that we continue to do folks justice.
Awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, it's a great film. I appreciate you sharing it with me early, and excited to put this out. Steven, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the film. We'll link everything out. We'll collaborate with you and the rest of the team on Instagram and all that stuff, and get this content out. Excited to see what the next phase of this journey for the film is for you guys. Wish you all the best and wish you success. And I'm chatting to Amy about getting some of the other cast on here this month.
Let's do it. I've sang your praises, especially as we go into January. Let's they're for sure. Let's get the other cast on, and they all have, they all have very unique stories. I don't want to give away too much, but like even Vondi Curtis Hall, I'll just tell you this little tidbit. He is named Vondi Curtis Hall. His father's name is Curtis Hall. The man who saved his father in a military operation during World War II, saved his father's life. That man's name was Vondi. That's how he got his name. And as you know, the humanity, the grit and the grace that he brings to his character as a Vietnam veteran is just unbelievable. Anyway, all of them are so amazing. Dominic Famusa too. He was in 13 Hours. He got to play Tig, right? So you got to get him on. And he was the best Coach O I could ever have, man.
He was incredible. He was great.
Yeah, he's also just a great human being. But anyway, we'll work to get that all sorted.
It'll be a fun end of the year for the podcast and the filmmaking front. And you're talking about Vondi and Vietnam. The episode after yours is going to be with Matthew Modine, and I'm talking to him.
I got to tell you a real story right now. Oh my God, our executive producer, Marine Corps veteran, right, Corey Ryan. His favorite movie, Full Metal Jacket, based on the book The Short Timers. Yeah. I got for his as a gift for him years ago. I got an OG copy of The Short Timers. I knew Matthew Modine's manager because he repped one of my friends, and I went into his office in LA and I begged him. And I said, "You have no idea how much my friend, when you get him drinking, philosophizes about Animal Mother and how, all the different things in the film." I'm like, "Is there any way?" And he's like, he's filming up in Vancouver right now. Anyway, long story short, FedEx the book to him. What a champion. He wrote a personal message in there for Corey. Yeah. Corey keeps that in his gun safe like it was like, something from the Louvre or something. Like, I just want to show you that. That's a good dude, man. He did not have to do that, and that said a lot about his character. And God, who doesn't love Joker? But I'm just saying, like, that's rad.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm excited.
You must be pumped.
I'm super pumped. Yeah, we're gonna watch obviously Full Metal Jacket again next week and flip through the book. He's got a copy. He's got a photo book from SEC. He took all those BTS photos, and he's sending it around to a bunch of different, sending an exhibition around to a bunch of different museums around the country. And he'll be here in Columbus at the National Veteran.
Oh my God. Good for you.
For Veterans Day. So I'm chatting to him a week from today, and really excited to dive into that. And so, yeah, it's going to be a fun end of the year on the filmmaking meets podcasting front here. So stoked.
Dude. All right. Well, keep kicking ass, man. And I appreciate you. Thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you. All right. Cheers.
All right, brother. Be good. Take care. Bye-bye.